In February 1943, a transport train carrying German prisoners of war crossed the Mississippi River at dawn under military guard. The manifest listed 732 enlisted men, captured weeks earlier in North Africa. As the train slowed on the approach to the bridge, the cars passed multiple rail lines running parallel, each occupied by freight wagons loaded with steel, grain, fuel, and machinery. Beyond the riverbank stood grain elevators, power plants, and factory buildings with illuminated windows despite the early hour. The train did not stop. It continued westward through switching yards extending beyond sight, where locomotives moved in continuous sequence. Prisoners assigned to window seats recorded the count of passing trains in their notebooks during permitted daylight hours. Guard logs from the same movement noted no delays due to congestion, despite parallel troop and cargo traffic moving in both directions. 2 days later, the same prisoners were unloaded at a camp located far from any combat zone. Within hours of arrival, work detachments were formed for agricultural and industrial labor. Supply trucks arrived before nightfall with food, fuel, and construction materials. Electrical lighting remained active across the installation after sunset. German military personnel captured by United States and Allied forces during operations in North Africa, Italy, and Western Europe were transferred to American custody under procedures established by the War Department and the Provost Marshal General's office. Initial processing took place in temporary enclosures near ports of embarkation, where prisoners were registered, searched, vaccinated, issued identification tags, and assigned transport numbers. Documentation accompanied each group, listing unit affiliation, rank, place of capture, and medical condition. From late 1942 onward, increasing numbers of prisoners were designated for transfer across the Atlantic. The movement followed established convoy schedules, with prisoners embarked on troop transports or converted cargo vessels under guard detachments trained for prisoner handling. During the sea passage, prisoners were confined to designated compartments, with rations issued according to U.S. Army standards for enemy prisoners of war, and medical inspections conducted by ship medical officers. Upon arrival at American ports, including New York, Norfolk, New Orleans, and Boston, prisoners disembarked under military supervision. Port records note the orderly transfer from ship to rail transport, with prisoners assembled in groups corresponding to their original manifests. Military police units controlled movement through dock areas that were active with cargo handling operations, cranes, trucks, and rail sidings. Prisoners were marched or transported by truck to nearby rail terminals, where they boarded trains configured with guarded cars. These trains departed according to schedules coordinated with the Army Transportation Corps, integrating prisoner movements into the broader system of wartime logistics. Rail transport routes extended across large distances, carrying prisoners through urban, industrial, agricultural, and sparsely populated regions. Guard reports and prisoner questionnaires record observations made during daylight travel, when window shutters were partially open for ventilation. Trains passed through cities with extensive rail yards, factories operating on continuous shifts, storage depots filled with raw materials and finished goods, and ports with lines of ships loading and unloading cargo. In rural areas, prisoners noted mechanized farms, grain elevators, silos, and road traffic involving trucks and tractors. These observations were recorded in intelligence summaries compiled by camp authorities from routine interrogations and censorship of prisoner correspondence, without commentary from the reporting officers. Upon arrival at permanent or semi-permanent camps, prisoners were processed again, assigned barracks, and briefed on camp regulations in accordance with the Geneva Convention. Camps were distributed across the continental United States, often located near existing military installations or in areas selected for climate, security, and logistical accessibility. Construction records indicate that camps were equipped with barracks, mess halls, infirmaries, workshops, guard towers, perimeter fencing, and utility infrastructure connected to local power and water systems. Prisoners arriving at these facilities underwent roll calls, equipment issue, and orientation procedures, followed by assignment to work details where authorized. Work programs for prisoners were administered under War Department directives permitting the use of enemy prisoner labor for non-military tasks. These programs involved agriculture, forestry, road maintenance, and processing work, as well as labor in canneries, mills, and other facilities under contract. Transportation to work sites often involved daily movement by truck or rail. During these movements, prisoners passed through or worked near industrial plants producing vehicles, machinery, munitions components, textiles, and food products. Reports compiled by camp commandants include references to prisoner comments regarding production volume, mechanization, and the number of workers employed at such sites, recorded as part of routine morale and security assessments. Censorship units reviewed outgoing prisoner mail in accordance with regulations. Extracts from letters, translated and summarized, include references to American factories operating day and night, the availability of materials, and the scale of transport networks. These extracts were filed without annotation and circulated within the Provost Marshal General's office as part of standard information flow. Prisoner diaries, when permitted, were subject to inspection, and entries describing rail journeys, industrial districts, and work assignments were catalogued in intelligence files. The language used in these materials reflected immediate observation, listing quantities, sizes, distances, and durations. Medical and welfare inspections conducted by the International Committee of the Red Cross included visits to camps and work sites. Inspection reports note the logistical arrangements supporting prisoner populations, including food supply chains, clothing issue, and medical provisioning. These reports reference the proximity of camps to rail lines, warehouses, and production centers supplying both military and civilian needs. The reports describe facilities and procedures without evaluative language, adhering to standardized reporting formats. Training materials for American guards and administrators emphasized maintaining discipline and preventing unauthorized communication. Guards were instructed to limit conversation and to enforce blackout measures on trains when required. Despite these measures, routine exposure during transport and work assignments resulted in prisoners witnessing large-scale operations involving material handling, manufacturing, and distribution. Camp intelligence officers compiled summaries of prisoner attitudes based on observed behavior and recorded statements, noting instances where prisoners requested clarification on production processes or logistics, documented without interpretation. Throughout 1943 and 1944, the number of German prisoners in the United States increased significantly, requiring expansion of camp infrastructure and transportation capacity. Army engineering units constructed additional camps and enlarged existing ones, drawing on standardized designs and local contractors. Supply records indicate large volumes of lumber, steel, concrete, and equipment allocated for these projects, delivered via rail and truck. Prisoners assigned to construction-related labor worked under supervision, performing tasks such as unloading materials, clearing land, and assisting with non-specialized work. Daily reports from these details list quantities moved and hours worked. Railway timetables and Transportation Corps memoranda show prisoner trains operating alongside troop movements and freight traffic. These documents reflect the integration of prisoner transport into the national rail network, with priority adjustments based on operational requirements. Prisoners traveling between camps or to temporary work assignments observed rail yards with extensive switching operations, long freight consists, and maintenance facilities. Observations recorded in camp reports include references to the frequency of trains and the diversity of cargo types, noted as part of routine information gathering. Agricultural labor programs placed prisoners on farms during planting and harvest seasons. County extension offices coordinated with camp authorities to allocate labor. Prisoners transported to farms passed through small towns and rural landscapes, noting paved roads, utility lines, and mechanized equipment. Work detail logs document the number of prisoners assigned, tasks performed, and output measured in acreage cultivated or quantities harvested. Prisoner comments recorded by supervising officers include references to machinery and fuel availability, filed without analysis. Industrial labor assignments in food processing, lumber milling, and other approved sectors exposed prisoners to assembly lines, conveyor systems, and power-driven equipment. Safety briefings and supervision were provided as required. Production records maintained by contracting companies list prisoner labor as part of the workforce, with output figures integrated into overall production totals. Camp authorities monitored compliance with regulations prohibiting prisoners from working directly on weapons or ammunition. Inspection reports note the presence of large inventories of raw materials and finished goods at these facilities. Security reports compiled by military intelligence service units attached to camps focus on discipline, escape prevention, and ideological activity among prisoners. Within these reports are sections summarizing prisoner perceptions of their surroundings, drawn from interrogations and intercepted communications. These summaries include factual descriptions of observed infrastructure, transportation systems, and production facilities. The language remains descriptive, listing observations such as distances traveled, sizes of buildings, and numbers of vehicles seen during routine movements. As the war progressed, prisoner transfers occurred between camps to balance labor needs and security considerations. Transfer orders detail embarkation times, routes, guard assignments, and ration allocations. Prisoners on these transfers again traveled through multiple regions, observing varied industrial and agricultural landscapes. Reports from escorting units note compliance with procedures and include appendices summarizing any noteworthy prisoner remarks, recorded verbatim or paraphrased, focusing on observed material conditions. The administrative framework governing prisoner management generated extensive documentation, including daily logs, weekly summaries, and monthly reports. Within this body of records are consistent references to the environment in which prisoners were held and employed. These references describe the presence of extensive supply depots, maintenance facilities, and transportation nodes supporting both military operations and civilian life. The records do not attribute significance or causality, adhering to reporting standards of the period. By late 1944, camps operated at near full capacity, with established routines for labor, recreation, education, and discipline. Educational programs, when permitted, included vocational training using equipment and materials available within camps. Inventories list tools, machinery, and instructional materials provided. Prisoner participation records note attendance and completion of courses. Observations recorded by camp staff include prisoner familiarity with certain equipment types encountered during work assignments, documented without commentary. Throughout their time in the United States, German prisoners remained subject to censorship and regulation. Their recorded observations of industrial, agricultural, and logistical systems encountered during transport and labor assignments form part of the surviving documentation. These records consist of factual statements, quantities, and descriptions compiled contemporaneously by military authorities, humanitarian inspectors, and administrative offices, reflecting the conditions and surroundings present at the time of recording. As prisoner populations stabilized within established camps, administrative routines expanded to accommodate sustained detention and labor utilization. Camp commandants maintained daily situation reports covering role strength, work assignments, disciplinary incidents, medical status, and logistical requirements. These reports included regular references to transportation schedules, supply deliveries, and coordination with civilian agencies. Prisoners assigned to external labor details were transported under guard to designated locations, often involving early morning departures and evening returns. Transportation logs list mileage covered, fuel consumption, and vehicle allocation, reflecting integration into regional transport systems supporting both military and civilian activity. Rail movements continued to form a central component of prisoner administration. Trains carrying prisoners between camps or to temporary branch camps operated on fixed schedules approved by regional transportation officers. Guard detachments recorded conditions observed during transit, including weather, rail traffic density, and delays caused by freight congestion or priority troop movements. Prisoner manifests attached to these reports list names, ranks, serial numbers, and destinations. In accompanying notes, guards recorded prisoner compliance and any remarks overheard during transit, transcribed without alteration or interpretation. Branch camps established near farms, lumber operations, sugar beet fields, and food processing plants functioned as satellite facilities under the authority of main camps. Construction records show these branch camps consisted of temporary barracks, kitchens, sanitation facilities, and fenced perimeters, supplied from central depots. Prisoners transferred to these locations often traveled through industrial corridors and agricultural regions characterized by extensive mechanization. Work detail reports from branch camps document tasks completed, hours worked, and output measured in standardized units, such as tons processed or acres cleared. Food supply for prisoner camps followed quartermaster corps procedures. Ration scales matched those prescribed by international agreements, adjusted based on availability. Supply ledgers list bulk deliveries of meat, grain, vegetables, canned goods, and dairy products, sourced from regional producers and transported via rail or truck. Prisoners assigned to kitchen duty handled foodstuffs delivered in large quantities, including packaged and processed items originating from industrial facilities. Inventory sheets note brand markings and packaging formats, recorded as part of standard accountability practices. Maintenance of camp infrastructure required continuous material input. Engineering maintenance logs list repairs to electrical systems, plumbing, heating equipment, and fencing. Replacement parts and tools were requisitioned through military supply channels, often delivered from nearby depots or factories. Prisoners assigned to maintenance details assisted under supervision, performing tasks such as cleaning, painting, and basic construction. Daily work records specify materials used and labor hours expended. Medical services within camps operated under Army Medical Department regulations. Infirmary reports list admissions, treatments, and evacuations, along with inventories of medical supplies. These supplies included pharmaceuticals, surgical instruments, bedding, and sanitation materials delivered through established supply networks. Prisoners transported to military hospitals for specialized care traveled under guard through urban areas, passing civilian hospitals, warehouses, and transport hubs. Escort reports document routes taken and time elapsed, adhering to standardized formats. Recreational and educational activities permitted within camps required additional logistical support. Recreation equipment inventories list sports gear, musical instruments, and books obtained through approved channels. Educational programs, where authorized, utilized classrooms equipped with desks, blackboards, and instructional materials. Procurement records indicate these items were sourced from civilian manufacturers and distributors operating under wartime production schedules. Delivery receipts filed with camp headquarters document quantities and dates. Censorship operations continued to generate translated extracts from prisoner correspondence. These extracts were categorized by subject, including references to work, camp conditions, food, and surroundings encountered outside the camp. References to factories, transport systems, and material availability were catalogued under general observation headings. The extracts preserve original phrasing where possible, with annotations limited to identification of sender and recipient. These documents circulated within administrative channels without evaluative remarks. Inspection tours by senior officers from the Provost Marshal General's office involved visits to multiple camps within a region. Itineraries list travel routes, distances, and transport modes, often involving rail and motor vehicles. Inspection reports describe camp layout, guard deployment, work programs, and coordination with civilian employers. Observations include descriptions of nearby industrial facilities and transport infrastructure, recorded as part of situational awareness relevant to camp security and logistics. Labor contracts with civilian employers were formalized through written agreements specifying wages credited to prisoner accounts, working hours, supervision requirements, and transportation arrangements. Contract files include site descriptions outlining machinery, workflow, and safety measures. Prisoners employed under these contracts worked in facilities processing agricultural products, timber, and other materials essential to civilian supply chains. Production summaries submitted by employers include aggregate output figures encompassing both civilian and prisoner labor. Security measures remained a primary focus of camp administration. Guard training manuals emphasized vigilance during prisoner movements through populated or industrial areas. Reports of attempted communication with civilians or observation of sensitive installations were logged and forwarded through intelligence channels. These reports include factual descriptions of locations and circumstances, with no interpretive language. Map references and photographs, where attached, depict rail yards, factories, and depots encountered during authorized movements. As seasonal labor demands shifted, prisoner assignments were adjusted accordingly. Transportation orders reflect increased movements during harvest periods, with corresponding increases in vehicle and fuel allocation. Road movement logs detail convoys passing through industrial towns, noting traffic volume and road conditions. Prisoners traveling on these convoys observed warehouses, processing plants, and distribution centers operating at capacity, as reflected in guard observations recorded contemporaneously. Camp supply depots maintained stocks of clothing, footwear, and equipment issued to prisoners. Quartermaster inventories list standardized uniforms, work gloves, boots, and weather gear produced by domestic manufacturers. Issue records document replacement cycles based on wear and seasonal requirements. Prisoners receiving new issue items handled garments bearing manufacturer labels and contract numbers, recorded as part of accountability procedures. Coordination with local authorities and businesses required regular correspondence. Letters and memoranda between camp headquarters and county offices address labor allocation, transportation scheduling, and compliance with regulations. These documents reference infrastructure such as roads, rail spurs, and loading docks used for prisoner transport and material handling. The language remains administrative and procedural, reflecting immediate operational needs. Training exercises for guard units occasionally involved simulated transport and security drills conducted in proximity to rail yards or industrial sites. After-action reports list participants, locations, and outcomes, focusing on adherence to protocol. These reports include descriptions of environmental factors such as noise levels, traffic density, and facility layout encountered during exercises. Prisoner population records maintained by camp adjutants track arrivals, departures, transfers, and repatriations. Statistical summaries compiled monthly include tables listing camp capacity, occupancy, and labor utilization rates. Footnotes reference expansion or reduction of work programs based on civilian demand and transportation availability. The summaries incorporate data drawn from multiple administrative sources without commentary. Throughout this period, the flow of materials, personnel, and information through camps and surrounding regions continued under established wartime systems. The documentation generated captures movements, quantities, schedules, and observations recorded at the time by military and civilian authorities responsible for prisoner administration. By early 1945, the network of main and branch prisoner-of-war camps across the continental United States functioned under established routines governed by War Department circulars and standing operating procedures. Daily administrative activity generated consistent streams of paperwork documenting movements, labor output, supply consumption, and security status. Camp adjutant offices maintained filing systems categorizing correspondence by subject and date, including transportation coordination, labor contracts, medical services, and liaison with civilian agencies. These records reflect ongoing interaction between military custody structures and the broader wartime economy operating at sustained capacity. Prisoner transfers continued as operational requirements shifted. Orders issued by service commands specified the number of prisoners to be moved, origin and destination camps, routing instructions, and escort strength. Rail transport remained the primary method for long-distance transfers. Transportation Corps memoranda detail coordination with railroad companies to allocate cars, schedule departures, and assign priority levels within congested rail networks. Escort unit logs from these movements include notations on train composition, including adjacent freight cars carrying industrial goods, agricultural products, and military supplies. Stops at major junctions exposed prisoners to extended rail yards with multiple classification tracks, maintenance shops, fueling stations, and signal towers, recorded as factual observations in escort reports. Temporary holding facilities near rail hubs were used during transfer delays. These facilities, often repurposed fairgrounds or military depots, were documented in site reports listing available utilities, fencing, guard accommodations, and access to rail spurs. Prisoners held at such locations for short durations were issued rations and medical checks according to standard procedures. Reports from these holding periods include descriptions of surrounding activity, such as continuous freight movement, loading operations, and nearby factories operating under wartime schedules, documented without elaboration. Labor utilization reports compiled at both camp and regional levels aggregated data from multiple work details. These reports list total man-days worked, categories of labor performed, and output figures submitted by civilian employers. Sectors employing prisoner labor included large-scale agriculture, timber harvesting, pulp and paper processing, food packing, and infrastructure maintenance. Site descriptions attached to labor agreements detail the layout of facilities, machinery in use, power sources, and transportation connections. Prisoners assigned to these sites were transported daily or housed in branch camps established within proximity, with logistical support documented through supply and transport records. Fuel and power supply records illustrate the scale of operations supporting both camps and associated work sites. Camp engineering sections maintained logs of electricity consumption, heating fuel usage, and water supply volumes. These utilities were sourced from municipal grids, regional power plants, or on-site generators. Maintenance correspondence references coordination with local power companies and fuel distributors to ensure uninterrupted service. Prisoners assigned to utility-related maintenance tasks assisted under supervision, handling materials delivered in bulk shipments, as recorded in inventory logs. Food production and distribution networks intersected with prisoner labor programs. Agricultural work details contributed to planting, harvesting, and processing operations feeding civilian and military supply chains. Processing facilities employing prisoners documented throughput volumes measured in tons or cases per day. Transportation manifests show finished products loaded onto rail cars or trucks destined for regional warehouses or ports. Prisoners involved in these operations observed mechanized sorting lines, refrigeration units, and packaging equipment, with such observations appearing in routine guard notes and censorship extracts. Medical evacuation and specialist treatment continued to require coordination beyond camp boundaries. Prisoners requiring advanced care were transported to army hospitals or contracted civilian facilities. Medical transport reports list routes, vehicles used, and escort arrangements. These movements often passed through urban medical districts with clusters of hospitals, supply warehouses, and training facilities. Reports filed by medical officers focus on patient status and compliance with procedures, with environmental observations recorded incidentally. Educational and vocational training programs expanded in some camps under authorization from higher command. Course offerings included basic literacy, mathematics, technical drawing, and trades such as carpentry or mechanics. Training equipment inventories list lathes, hand tools, drafting tables, and instructional materials procured through military supply channels or civilian vendors. Class schedules and attendance rosters were maintained by camp education officers. Prisoners participating in these programs handled equipment comparable to that used in civilian industry, documented through equipment issue records. Security intelligence summaries compiled by camp intelligence officers continued to include sections on prisoner observations of external environments. These summaries drew from interrogations, informant reports, and correspondence censorship. Entries list descriptions of industrial complexes, transportation volumes, and material stockpiles seen during authorized movements. The summaries were formatted as bullet points or brief paragraphs, identifying sources and dates without analytical commentary. Inspection visits by representatives of the International Committee of the Red Cross persisted into this period. Inspection reports follow standardized templates, listing camp population figures, housing conditions, food provision, medical care, and labor arrangements. Descriptions of camp surroundings and nearby economic activity appear in sections addressing location and accessibility. These reports reference rail access, road quality, and proximity to industrial or agricultural centers, recorded as part of situational context. Weather and seasonal conditions influenced camp operations and labor assignments. Monthly reports include notes on weather-related disruptions to transport or work schedules. Winter conditions required increased fuel consumption and maintenance of heating systems, while spring thaw affected road conditions for truck convoys. These operational impacts are reflected in transport delay reports and fuel requisition adjustments. Prisoners transported during these periods observed maintenance crews, snow removal operations, and infrastructure repair work underway along rail lines and highways. Communications infrastructure supporting camp administration included telephone lines, telegraph connections, and mail services. Signal Corps documentation lists installation and maintenance of communication equipment linking camps with regional headquarters and civilian partners. Prisoners assigned to clerical or maintenance details encountered offices equipped with typewriters, filing systems, and communication apparatus. Equipment inventories and maintenance logs document these assets without descriptive embellishment. Clothing and equipment supply cycles continued under Quartermaster Corps management. Seasonal issue schedules resulted in bulk deliveries of cold weather or warm weather gear. Warehouse receipts list shipment origins, quantities, and transportation modes. Prisoners receiving new issues handled standardized items marked with contract identifiers and manufacturer codes. Issue and replacement records were maintained to track stock levels and usage rates. Coordination with law enforcement and civil defense authorities occurred in regions where camps or work sites were located near critical infrastructure. Memoranda of Understanding outline procedures for emergency response, transportation incidents, or security alerts. These documents reference local industrial facilities, power plants, and transportation nodes relevant to contingency planning. Records of joint exercises or coordination meetings list participants, locations, and procedural outcomes. Throughout this phase of operations, administrative, logistical, and security documentation continued to record prisoner movements, labor utilization, and environmental observations as part of routine wartime management. The records remain focused on immediate operational details, preserving contemporaneous descriptions of the material and organizational environment encountered by prisoners during custody within the United States. During the final months of large-scale prisoner administration in 1945, camp operations continued under unchanged procedural frameworks. Camp headquarters issued routine orders governing roll calls, work details, inspections, and supply distribution. Daily logs maintained by adjutants recorded personnel counts, including officers, enlisted guards, and prisoners present at midnight strength. These logs also list arrivals and departures resulting from transfers, medical evacuations, or reassignment to labor details. The format and language of these records remained consistent with earlier periods, reflecting ongoing administrative continuity. Transportation activity associated with prisoner movements remained extensive. Rail transfer orders continued to be executed under Transportation Corps coordination, with prisoner cars attached to mixed freight and personnel trains. Escort unit after-action reports document routes traversed, junctions passed, and layovers encountered due to rail congestion. These reports include factual descriptions of rail infrastructure observed during stops, such as switching yards with multiple locomotives in operation, maintenance sheds, water towers, fuel depots, and signaling equipment. Observations were recorded as part of situational awareness, without reference to purpose beyond documentation. Branch camps supporting seasonal and industrial labor programs remained active where civilian demand persisted. Camp status reports list branch camp populations, supply requirements, and transportation arrangements. Prisoners housed at these locations were supported by regular deliveries of food, fuel, and medical supplies. Supply convoy records list vehicle types, load weights, and delivery intervals. Convoys traveled along established routes passing industrial zones, storage facilities, and agricultural processing centers, noted in driver logs and escort reports. Labor utilization continued to be tracked through standardized reporting channels. Weekly labor summaries compiled by camp labor officers aggregated data from multiple details, listing categories such as field work, processing plant labor, maintenance, and construction support. Output figures submitted by civilian employers were attached to these summaries. Employer reports describe facility operations in factual terms, listing machinery in use, workforce size, and daily throughput. Prisoners assigned to these sites worked under supervision, with compliance inspections conducted periodically by military and civilian authorities. Fuel, power, and material supply records illustrate sustained levels of consumption. Camp engineering sections submitted regular requisitions for coal, fuel oil, gasoline, and electricity. Utility bills and delivery receipts were filed as part of financial accountability. Coordination with municipal utilities and private suppliers is documented in correspondence specifying delivery schedules and service maintenance. Prisoners involved in unloading fuel shipments or maintaining equipment recorded quantities handled and tasks performed in work detail logs. Food processing and storage facilities employing prisoner labor continued operations aligned with regional distribution needs. Processing plant records list inbound raw materials and outbound finished products transported by rail or truck. Refrigeration and storage capacity figures appear in facility reports attached to labor contracts. Prisoners assigned to these facilities observed conveyor systems, packaging lines, loading docks, and warehouse operations during their shifts, with such observations appearing incidentally in guard notes and censorship extracts. Medical services maintained regular reporting cycles. Infirmary daily census sheets list patients under treatment, diagnoses, and dispositions. Supply inventories include medications, dressings, and equipment replenished through Army Medical Department channels. Prisoners transported for off-site treatment followed established escort procedures. Transport reports list vehicle types, routes, and travel times, often passing through medical supply districts, pharmaceutical warehouses, and transport hubs associated with hospital operations. Educational and vocational programs continued where authorized. Course rosters and attendance logs were updated weekly. Equipment maintenance records list servicing of tools and machines used in training workshops. Supply requests for instructional materials were processed through standard channels. Prisoners participating in these programs were issued equipment under controlled conditions, with issue and return documented in inventory ledgers. Censorship operations remained in effect until the end of hostilities and beyond. Mail processing logs record volumes handled daily. Translated extracts from correspondence continued to be categorized by subject. References to transportation, industry, and material availability encountered during authorized movements were filed alongside other routine observations. Extracts preserved original wording, with annotations limited to administrative identifiers. Security intelligence summaries continued to be compiled at regular intervals. These summaries list incidents, disciplinary actions, and general observations reported by guards or intelligence personnel. Sections addressing prisoner remarks include descriptions of external environments seen during work or transport. Entries identify dates and locations, maintaining a factual tone without interpretation. Inspection activity by military authorities and humanitarian organizations persisted. Inspection itineraries list travel routes, distances, and modes of transport used to reach camps and branch facilities. Reports describe camp conditions, labor arrangements, and compliance with regulations. Descriptions of surrounding infrastructure appear in sections addressing location and access, noting proximity to rail lines, roads, and industrial or agricultural facilities. Weather-related operational adjustments continued to be documented. Reports note delays caused by storms, flooding, or extreme temperatures affecting transportation and work schedules. Engineering logs record maintenance activities addressing weather impacts on buildings, roads, and utilities. Prisoners involved in repair and maintenance tasks documented materials used and hours worked. Communications infrastructure remained essential to camp administration. Signal Corps maintenance reports list inspections and repairs of telephone and telegraph lines. Equipment inventories include switchboards, wiring, and spare parts. Prisoners assigned to maintenance or clerical support encountered offices equipped with communication devices and administrative machinery, recorded in equipment issue and maintenance logs. Clothing and equipment issue cycles continued under Quartermaster Corps oversight. Seasonal transitions prompted bulk deliveries of appropriate gear. Warehouse and issue records list item descriptions, quantities, and distribution dates. Prisoners receiving replacement signed issue forms acknowledging receipt, filed as part of personnel records. Coordination with civilian authorities and employers continued through written correspondence and meetings. Memoranda address labor needs, transportation coordination, and compliance with regulations. These documents reference specific facilities, routes, and infrastructure relevant to ongoing operations. Meeting minutes list attendees and topics discussed, adhering to administrative formats. As hostilities in Europe concluded, administrative directives addressed changes in prisoner status, including consolidation of camps and preparation for eventual repatriation. Orders issued during this period focused on maintaining discipline, health, and order pending further instructions. Transfer and consolidation plans are documented through routing orders and capacity assessments. Prisoners moved under these plans continued to travel through established transportation networks, with escort reports documenting movements and observed conditions in the same factual manner as earlier periods. Throughout this phase, the documentation generated by camp administrations, transportation units, labor offices, medical services, and inspection bodies continued to record immediate operational details. These records preserve contemporaneous accounts of the material environment, infrastructure, and logistical systems encountered by prisoners during custody, expressed through standardized reporting language and procedural documentation current at the time. Following the issuance of directives associated with the cessation of organized combat in Europe, prisoner of war camp administrations in the United States continued to operate under standing regulations while awaiting further orders. Camp commandants maintained the established reporting cycle, submitting daily and weekly summaries through service command channels. These summaries continued to list prisoner strength, guard strength, work detail assignments, medical census, disciplinary actions, and supply status. Administrative continuity is reflected in unchanged forms and filing practices, with updates limited to modified routing instructions and adjusted labor allocations as civilian requests and military priorities shifted. Transportation arrangements remained active as consolidation plans were implemented. Regional headquarters issued movement orders specifying the transfer of prisoner groups from smaller branch camps to larger main camps or to designated staging installations. Transportation Corps coordination memoranda continued to allocate rail cars and establish departure windows within congested schedules dominated by freight movement and returning personnel. Escort detachments prepared by issuing ration packs, verifying prisoner rosters, and conducting searches before embarkation. Transfer files include complete manifests, including serial numbers and baggage allowances, and escort orders identifying guard personnel and authorized use of firearms under applicable rules. Rail movements executed under these orders followed established routes through major junctions and classification yards. Escort logs document scheduled stops and unscheduled delays resulting from track congestion, locomotive changes, and priority freight. Where prisoners were held aboard trains during extended layovers, escort reports list water distribution, sanitation measures, and head counts conducted at intervals. These reports also contain factual descriptions of the immediate surroundings, including adjacent industrial sidings, warehouses with loading platforms, freight cranes, and continuous switching operations. Notations on audible industrial activity, visible smokestacks, and plant lighting during nighttime halts appear in the same brief, descriptive format used earlier in the war. Upon arrival at receiving camps, prisoners underwent intake procedures consistent with prior practice. Receiving officers verified manifests, conducted roll calls, inspected baggage, and assigned billets. Medical sections performed screening checks and recorded any injuries sustained during transport. Administrative files show updates to prisoner records reflecting new camp assignment, work eligibility status, and financial account balances maintained for wage credits earned through authorized labor. Property accountability forms list items retained by prisoners and items held in storage, recorded without comment. Labor programs continued under existing contracts where civilian demand persisted and where War Department policy permitted continuation. Camp labor officers maintained liaison with county offices, farm bureaus, and contracted industrial employers. Revised labor allocation schedules were issued to reflect reduced requirements in some sectors and continued seasonal needs in others. Weekly labor reports during this period continue to list man days provided and output measures supplied by employers. Agricultural work details remained active for planting, cultivation, and harvest tasks as regional cycles dictated. Food processing facilities continued operations where contracts remained in force, with production logs recording inbound raw materials and outbound shipments moved by rail and truck. Branch camp status reports reflect consolidation measures. Some branch camps were reduced in population or closed, with prisoners and equipment returned to parent camps. Closure procedures documented in engineering and quartermaster files include inventory of furnishings, tools, kitchen equipment, and fencing materials. Transportation logs list truck convoys used to remove supplies, with load manifests and mileage recorded. Guard reports for branch camp closures list perimeter inspections, final searches, and transfer roll calls conducted prior to movement. Site condition reports filed after closure list remaining structures and utility status, including disconnection of water lines, electrical service termination, and sanitation system securing. Supply systems continued to support both active and consolidating installations. Quartermaster records show ongoing deliveries of food, clothing, and fuel, adjusted to reflect changing camp populations. Ration issue sheets list daily distribution quantities based on head counts. Camp mess sections maintained inventories of staples and perishable items, with delivery receipts and storage inspections filed routinely. Clothing issue records continued to document replacement of work-worn items, with standard forms signed by issuing personnel. Fuel delivery receipts list coal or oil quantities delivered to camp heating plants and motor pool gasoline allocations for transport operations. Engineering and maintenance sections continued to operate under routine schedules. Maintenance logs list repairs to barracks, kitchens, latrines, and perimeter fencing. Where camps prepared for population reductions, engineering correspondence includes orders to concentrate prisoners into fewer barracks to reduce heating and maintenance requirements. Utility consumption logs show adjustments corresponding to these measures, listing reduced electricity and fuel usage where applicable. Motor pool records document vehicle maintenance cycles, including oil changes, tire replacements, and repair of transport trucks used for prisoner movements and work detail convoys. Medical reporting remained continuous. Infirmary rosters list admissions, discharges, and referrals. Camp medical officers submitted weekly health reports identifying communicable disease monitoring, vaccination status, dental care provision, and sanitation inspections. Medical supply inventories were maintained with requisitions for pharmaceuticals and consumables processed through Army channels. When prisoners required hospitalization outside the camp, escort and transport reports continued to document vehicle use, route taken, and custody procedures during treatment and return. Hospital liaison notes filed with the camp medical section list appointment times, diagnoses, and discharge instructions in standardized format. Censorship and mail control procedures remained in effect, with mail volume and processing logged daily. Censorship sections maintain translation and extraction routines, producing summaries categorized by subject matter. Extracts from prisoner correspondence during this period include references to transfers, camp consolidation, changes in work assignments, and continued observation of transportation activity during movement. These extracts preserve immediate description of sites encountered, such as rail yards, factories, warehouses, and traffic flow, recorded as part of administrative monitoring. Security operations maintained emphasis on escape prevention and control of unauthorized contact. Guard rosters, tower logs, and perimeter patrol reports continued to be filed. Incident reports document any attempted escapes, disciplinary infractions, or contraband discoveries, identifying dates, locations, and personnel involved. Intelligence summaries compiled by camp intelligence officers continued to include brief notes on prisoner sentiments and remarks gathered through routine monitoring, with entries limited to what was reported at the time and recorded in standardized phrasing. Where prisoner transfers increased movement frequency, escort units filed additional after-action reports noting compliance, head counts, and any irregularities during transit. International Committee of the Red Cross inspections and correspondence continued where scheduled. Inspection reports during this period list camp population changes, housing arrangements, food provision, medical care, and labor conditions. Where consolidation affected branch camps, inspection notes reference closure or reduction status, listing dates and administrative actions. The reports describe infrastructure relevant to camp access, including rail connections, road conditions, and proximity to civilian centers. These records remain formatted as observational checklists and narrative notes without interpretive statements. Administrative preparation for repatriation involved compilation of records and coordination across agencies. Camp adjutants ensured prisoner identification files were complete, including capture data, medical records, disciplinary history, and work assignments. Financial clerks maintained account statements listing wage credits and authorized deductions for canteen purchases. Property officers compiled inventories of items held for prisoners and prepared procedures for return or disposal according to regulation. Correspondence between camp headquarters and regional commands addressed anticipated movement requirements, including availability of rail transport, staging capacities at ports, and guard allocation plans. When repatriation movements commenced, prisoner groups were assembled in staging areas under guard. Movement orders specify reporting times, baggage limits, ration issue, and medical screening prior to departure. Prisoners were transported by rail to coastal staging installations, with escort unit logs documenting routes and stops. At staging installations, records list temporary billeting, medical rechecks, and re-verification of manifests prior to embarkation. Port operations files show coordination between camp authorities, transportation officers, and port commanders to schedule embarkation. Ship loading procedures were documented in manifests and security orders, listing prisoner groups assigned to specific holds or compartments and guard detachments assigned by section. Throughout rail movement to ports, prisoners continued to pass through industrial districts and transportation hubs. Escort reports from these movements include repeated factual descriptions of rail congestion, freight volume, and active industrial sidings. Where trains passed through urban areas at low speed or stopped at junctions, guards noted proximity of factories, warehouses, and loading platforms. These notes were filed as part of standard escort documentation. In some cases, prisoners were moved by truck between rail terminals and port facilities. Convoy logs list distances, fuel usage, vehicle identification numbers, and escort strength. Port staging records include counts of vehicles used and time required for transfer. At embarkation points, processing included roll calls, baggage inspection, and assignment to ship sections. Medical personnel conducted final checks for communicable disease control, with records indicating vaccinations administered where required and isolation procedures for any identified cases. Quartermaster personnel issued travel rations and accounted for utensils and water containers. Guard detachments received briefing orders covering shipboard security, muster procedures, and emergency actions. These orders were filed with port command records and escort unit files. As prisoners departed American custody through embarkation, camp administrations continued to maintain remaining operations for prisoners not yet scheduled for movement. Consolidation of camps proceeded according to regional plans, with additional closures and reductions documented in engineering, quartermaster, and personnel files. Final administrative actions recorded in camp logs include transfer of equipment to other installations, disposition of structures, and reassignment of guard personnel. Records throughout this period continue to reflect the same wartime administrative language and procedural documentation, capturing movements, quantities, schedules, and observed material conditions recorded in the moment by military and civilian authorities responsible for custody, labor administration, supply, and transport.